Open Public Meetings Act. Thank you. This regular meeting of the Planning Board of the Township of Franklin has been provided. Should we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Chase?
Here.
Carl Houck asked to be excused. Maher Rafiq?
Here.
Cecile McIver?
Here.
Robert Mettler?
Here.
Mustafa Manzray? Charles Brown?
Here.
Robert Thomas and Jennifer Ragnow, as well as Chairman Orsini, all asked to be excused, and I do not see Godwin Amalola.
I don't see. Well, we have the minutes of June the 19th.
Correct. Robert Mettler, Charles Brown cannot vote on them. Someone else will have to make the first and second.
I'll move the acceptance of the minutes.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, and let the record show that Mustafa Manzray just came in. Okay, Councilman Chase?
Yes.
Maher Rafiq?
Yes.
Cecile McIver?
Yes.
Mustafa, would you like a chance to vote on the June 19th meeting? I know, minutes, I realize you're just sitting down.
Yes.
Okay. That's it?
Okay, there aren't any resolutions for this evening, and I do see a discussion piece here.
Yes, the extension of time, I believe there's supposed to be someone here I think Mark's going to go get them. Yeah, there has to be someone here for them.
Manfred is out in the hallway. I think. Barbecue tonight. Maybe that the applicant has not.
We're here and ready. 413 Somerset Street Associates.
Peter Lamford, 413 Somerset Street Associates. We are withdrawing our request for an extension, so I just wanted to put that on the record. I was just recently retained by the owner in reviewing the history of this. The owner had obtained prior extensions, and they're not entitled to an additional extension, so we are withdrawing our request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let the record show that Godwin Amalola showed up as well.
On to our first application of the evening. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Are there any questions or comments from the public that has nothing to do with the two hearings that we have tonight? If so, please come forward.
Madam Chairman, I would, seeing no one coming forward, I would move that the public hearing be closed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, on to our first application, HESP Solar.
Sir, you can sit at the table. You can sit down there.
Members of the board, good evening. My name is Rob Simon. I'm an attorney with Herald Law in Warren, New Jersey. I'm here on behalf of HESP Solar LLC, who's filed an application with this board regarding property owned by RH 100 Franklin Square Drive LLC, located at 100 Franklin Square Drive in the corporate business zone, lot 3902, block 502.02, where a 4-story office building currently sits on the property. The applicant is here this evening for permission to install and maintain solar canopy arrays and panels, which is inherently beneficial use under the municipal land use law, over a portion of the existing parking lot at the property. No parking spaces are proposed to be eliminated as part of this application, where we're seeking a preliminary and final major site plan approval. We also need to seek a de minimis variance regarding impervious coverage. The maximum permitted impervious coverage in the CB zone is 55%. The property is currently at 66%, and we are 66.21%. So that's a 0.21% increase. So the surrounding area is predominantly occupied by light industrial, hotels, and office uses. Throughout New Jersey, installing solar canopy arrays on rooftops, in parking lots, and with over probably 30 solar projects at this point. And of course, we also will be seeking any, whether it's variances, waivers, exceptions that may be necessary or required to permit the development as proposed. This evening, we have one witness, Rob Michello from Gladstone Design, who's the project engineer, and also with us, available to answer questions if need be, is Susan Brody on behalf of the applicant. And with that, I'd like to have Mr. Michello sworn.
Mr. Michello, if you could raise your right hand, if you could provide him with the microphone, please, or, there we go, perfect. Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name for the record, and please provide us with your address.
Robert Moschello, Moschello. Business address is 265 Main Street, Gladstone, New Jersey, 07934.
And you're a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey.
Licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey.
You're accepted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So I'm just going to enter the exhibits as I go here. So the first exhibit that I have, and it's already up on the screen, and we'll start off. A1, is that great?
A1 would be perfect. If you could add today's date on that. Today is August 7th, and the last item is the application number, which is PLN-19-00009. It's 4 zeros and a 9.
Got it. Okay, so this exhibit is entitled A1. It's also dated August 7th, 2019. It's entitled Neighborhood Exhibit. And what we're looking at here, and I'm not sure which screen, I guess I just point to the board. Is that okay? And we'll just leave the screens up. So what we're looking at here is the 2015 New Jersey State Aerial, and I've created this exhibit just to show the surrounding neighborhood. So north being to the top right on the plan, Route 287 is on the right side of the plan. Davidson Avenue is on the bottom side of the plan, going in a I'll say, a northeast to southwest direction. You can see the property is outlined in yellow. I'll talk about the property in a moment, but outlined in yellow here in the middle of the plan. You have Franklin Square Drive, which is a cul-de-sac that was created off of Davidson Avenue. And you can see the surrounding uses that surround the property. You can see we are within your CB, or commercial business zone. This gray line on the exhibit here represents the separation zone line between your CB zone, which basically surrounds the entire site, and the M2 manufacturing zone, which is to the north of the property. So as you can see from looking at the aerial exhibit, the surrounding environs is primarily all office uses around the property and hotels, whether it be on the north, west, south, or east sides of the property. It's all surrounded and by developed properties in and around the site itself, comprised of office and hotel and other such commercial type of uses. There's no residential uses within any distance of the property, as you can see shown on the map here. Within at least 1,000 or 2,000 feet in any direction, there's no residential uses within the area of the property itself. The next plan that I have here, this is entitled, and we'll call this one, it'll be A2. Also, August 7th.
Yep, August 7th.
2019. And just, can you please repeat that number again? PLN-000.
No, PLN-19-00009.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks.
Great. This is what I'm entitling Site Aerial Exhibit. What I've done is I've blown up the state aerial plan just so you could see the existing conditions in more detail here. So the property is known as Block 502.02. It's Lot 39.02, and it is comprised of 5.82 acres, as outlined in yellow here on the attached plan. We have two frontages on the property, one, of course, being along Davidson Avenue, the second frontage being on Franklin Square Drive, which was created as part of what was probably a larger subdivision of this property that created these office buildings in and around this cul-de-sac that's there today. The property has one main point of access off of Franklin Square Drive into the site. There is a 4-story office building on the property that's comprised of approximately 100,000 square foot in size. And there's about 392 parking spaces on the existing property today. And then there's the main building entry point is on the south west side of the building here where my pointer is, and there's 2 additional entry points on the north and I'll say east side of the building facade. And then the facade that faces Davidson Avenue has some utilities, but there's no entry on that. And as you can see, the property is fully developed, completely built out in terms of parking. It's been landscaped. You can see the vegetative landscaping around the perimeter of the property, as well as some landscaping within these islands. And if you look here closely, you'll see these gray strips or islands in here. That's actually what are the landscaped islands in the parking lot area, but they're actually landscaped with riverstone. There's no grass in those islands, but it is riverstone that was installed there, probably for maintenance purposes a number of years ago. But there's an island here, an island here. There's no island in the middle here. There's 3 square-shaped, what were 4 tree planters, where there are trees shown in here, but you can see they're very hard to see on the aerial plan. They've actually been cut down already. For whatever reason, they were ash trees, and they've been removed, probably because of the ash borer that's going around. And there's some trees here in this landscaped island here, and then there's no landscaped island in this section of the parking lot here. So you've got it's just a different, some islands, some no islands in the parking area. So there's no consistency to the parking lot layout, but you do have some islands there, and some places you do not. Just in terms of the environmental constraints on the property, as you can see from the aerial, it's pretty well developed. There's no wetlands, no state open waters, no floodplains. There's no steep slopes on the property. As a matter of fact, it's relatively flat. It's about maybe a 4 to 5 foot grade change from the high side on the site here down to probably was the low side closest to Franklin Square Drive. There's an existing stormwater collection system already installed on the property that picks up the runoff and takes it to the southwest portion of the site. There's actually a basin off in the corner. It was probably constructed as part of this complex 30, 40 years ago when this was built. It's all serviced by public utilities. So on to the proposed application. And this will be A3. And PLN 19-00009. Thank you. And 8/7/2019. So this is entitled Site Plan Rendering, dated August 7th, 2019. What I've done here is I've taken the site dimension plan that's in the drawing set, and I've superimposed the state aerial and the landscaping on there as well. So you have a combination of items to show on here to represent the proposed project. As Mr. Simon pointed out, this is a solar canopy project where we're installing proposed solar canopies over the existing parking areas on the subject site itself. It consists of an approximately 700 kilowatt solar array that's being installed to provide electrical power basically behind the meter for this proposed office building use that is on the property. So ultimately with the electrical connections, I'll go into some detail, but it basically generates power behind the meter. It's kind of like net metering. It doesn't go direct. It's not tied directly into the grid like you might see on a landfill type of project, but this is behind the meter, and the electricity is used to offset the cost to buy electricity for the end user inside the building. So in terms of the layout that we're proposing here, as I mentioned, the main access is off of Franklin Square Drive. You come in, and we're proposing 5 arrays on the north side of the property, and then 1 array in front of the building over here. I do want to point out, I think now is the proper time to do it. While I will go through the review letters that were issued by the board's professionals and the township's consultants a little later on, but there is a comment in the review letter from the fire official about the array that's located in front of the building right here. I've spoken to the fire official today, and we are going to remove that array from the plans because he brought up the fact that he felt that was an impediment to being able to access the building with a ladder truck, and we understand his concerns, and so we're going to remove this array from the plan. So some of the numbers I'm going to talk about still deal with the whole project, but I'm going to try to give you some of the reduced numbers as well as I go through the rest of my testimony.
Mr. Michelle, for the record, if you can just identify verbally the area of the site where we are removing the panel. So that's on the
It's on
southwest.
the southwest side of the building, the facade of the building that faces Franklin Square Drive, that grouping of panels, the entire array that's proposed there, which accounts for approximately 280 panels of the 2,000 panels we're proposing, we're going to remove that from the plans.
So your calculations, as you're going to get into your testimony regarding impervious coverage and tree replacement, will take into account the fact that we're actually taking out some of those panels.
Correct.
Thank you.
So with that all being said, that array will be removed. So the remaining project will generally will be focused on the rear portion of the site. I say rear as it relates to Davidson Avenue, with no panels up here in the front. I do want to talk briefly just about what the array is going to look like and the components of the array. I don't think I need to enter this as an exhibit. This is sheet 9 of 9, which is in my drawing set. So I don't believe I have to enter that as an exhibit. Is that correct?
Because there's some coloring on here, which I don't know if it showed up on on your plan set.
It was printed black and white.
Right, so why don't, I would suggest
Okay.
here that we mark it.
All right, A4. And this plan's actually dated April 5th, 2019, but I'll put the meeting date on here in PLN 19-00019. 9. I'm going to remember it.
9.
Goody math.
I'll get there.
He'll be back for number 19, rest assured.
So this plan is entitled Construction Details, and this is in the drawing set that was submitted to the board. I just want to use this just to show you generally what these arrays are typically comprised of and what they look like before I go back to the plan view. So this detail, which is called canopy details here on the plan, generally shows a cross-section of what the array will look like. And there's two different types that we have here. One is a straight array, where it looks like it's a T, but the panels are straight across with a column in the middle that supports it. The other type of array is it's almost like a Y, where there's a valley in the middle here, and then a column that supports it. It just depends on the orientation of the panels to the sun in terms of which type of array we use and the size of the array in the plans. And I'll go back and show you that momentarily. But it's basically comprised of a foundation, which is a 3-foot diameter concrete foundation. We typically drill a borehole into the ground, and we install what you see here, a steel rebar cage that is then concrete poured around it, and then that creates the foundation. And those 3-foot diameter foundations are really what generates the additional impervious coverage on the site that leads towards that 0.21% variance that we're asking for lot coverage. So we have 61 of these foundations on the project, and they're what generates the impervious coverage for the project. And then a small utility pad as well, and I'll get into that a little later. So you have the concrete foundation, which supports a column, a large steel column that then supports basically a truss-looking type of structure that goes across it, that creates the T, and then from there we put this steel structure on, and the panels are bolted to that steel structure. And that basically creates the canopy, as you can see in this picture here, under the solar panel T-frame detail, what that canopy typically looks like. While we're talking about the canopies, I want to also talk about a comment that was in the fire official's review letter as it relates to the height of the canopies. He requested, and right now, 5 inches of vertical clearance, basically at the lowest point of the canopy, which is like 13 feet, 9 inches. He requested that we provide 14 feet vertical clearance underneath the canopies, when it's on pavement areas. So if they had to drive the ladder truck underneath the canopy, that wouldn't impede the ladder truck from doing so. So we'll agree to do that and make that adjustment to the under dimension of the canopy to meet that 14-foot clear that he's asking for on there. And then again, the canopy, because it's a slanted canopy, the height of it will vary anywhere from approximately 14 feet at its lowest point to about approximately 20 feet at its highest point, depending on how you measure that from pavement. Pavement varies slightly. But that would be the heights of the canopy in the parking lot area. So going back to A3, the canopies that are being proposed are, again, on the northern side of the site. There's now going to be 5 in total. They're basically designed to either line up with the center line of the parking stalls where there is no middle island, such as this area here, the canopy furthest to the north, and the one in the middle. There's no island in between those parking stalls, so you just have head-to-head parking. So the foundations will be lined up with the striping in the center of those stalls. So when you pull in, you won't be impacted by it, just like light poles that you would see in a parking lot. For the canopy on the north and the canopy in the middle. Also, in the middle here, there's 3 diamonds that were, call them diamonds, but they're squares, that were there for trees. And those are those ash trees that were already removed. So Those are considered landscaped areas, so we have to remove those and put pavement there and then fill in for the foundation. So that's where the rest of the impervious cover increase is coming from. So you have your 61 foundations that we're going to be drilling in, plus filling in these 3 landscape portions with pavement because we're putting canopies over that. So we have the 5 canopies up here, and I mentioned there were approximately 2,034 panels. By removing the 1 canopy to the south, we're now going to be left with 1,754 panels, approximately total number, on the project site itself. Just some comments on the parking lot. Oh, we lost the screen here. Advance the slides. Let's advance the slide. Just in terms of the overall parking, the overall site itself, there will be no changes to the parking lot layout in terms of number of parking spaces. Going to remain as it is under existing conditions. There will be the need to do some trenching through the parking lot area in order to take the conduit from the canopies. Once all these are wired up, we have to take the power from the canopies and bring it to the front of the building. There's a utility connection point in the front of the building here, which faces Davidson Avenue. There's actually a generator there now. But that's the connection point where we have to bring that power to, where then it'll be tied into the electrical system as part of the building and the metering that goes on there. So that trenching looks like, right now we're proposing to come around the front through the grass area, but that could change and come around the north side as well. And time of before we go to construction. In terms of the overall impervious coverage, because of the foundations and because of filling in these couple islands in here, we're looking at a slight increase of over 500 square feet of impervious coverage over the entire site. Now, when I remove this canopy, I get a credit back for 7 foundations of approximately 50 square feet. So we're going to be right around 475 square feet of impervious increase on this property, which is probably just under 0.2% over that overall impervious number. So we're at 66% now, probably going to be at 66.2 now, as opposed to 0.21 for the increase for impervious coverage. Even though that number is somewhat de minimis from a stormwater standpoint, it's almost imperceptible based on a 5.8 acre site. Your ordinance, and this was mentioned in your board engineer's review letter, your ordinance does require some type of mitigation for stormwater management for minor development. We are less than a quarter acre of new impervious, less than an acre of disturbance, so we're not a major, but you do have a minor requirement in your ordinance. So we are ordinance to do some type of mitigation for that basically 475 square feet of impervious increase. So while it's not shown on the plans now, we would agree to work with the board engineer should you grant favorable approval of this application to come up with either a dry well or a small infiltration trench just to deal with that little bit of impervious increase to mitigate that slight increase in impervious surface to meet your ordinance standards. And that shouldn't be an issue to make that work on a site like this. In terms of landscaping, the site is generally landscaped along Franklin Square Drive.
I'm sorry, before we get to landscaping, I think there was a comment in the engineer's report about replacing the B inlet type curb pieces.
Yes.
So if you can just address that.
Yeah, given that the site is an older developed site, there's about, I think, 8 or 10 B inlets, which are your curb type inlets, in the parking lot of the site. They're the old style inlets. You now have, under the standards, we have the eco style grates, which have a different size opening on the top and the labels for drains to rivers, dump no waste. So we would agree under the engineer's letter to replace those 8 or 10 inlet casings with new ones that meet the standard as a condition of approval, should it be approved. So in terms of the landscaping, as I mentioned, the site's generally landscaped along Franklin Square Drive. There's some trees along the rear and the northern property line. And there's some vegetation along Davidson Avenue as well. In accordance with your ordinance, based upon the prior calculation, we were removing 35 trees basically in this parking lot area back here, and then 7 trees where this canopy was being installed. Since this canopy is no longer being installed, 7 of those trees are now going to remain, so now we're only going to remove 28 trees.
So on the southwestern portion of the property, we're going to retain the 7 trees that were
At the front
originally
end.
slated for removal.
At the front entrance of the building, correct. So when you do that, we were required to do 23 trees. It probably goes down to around 20 replacement trees on the site. We're proposing 28 trees be planted generally in and around the landscaped area on the property, basically to fill in some gaps in some of the landscaping that's out there today. And there's some comments in the board planner's review letter about some landscaping questions that he had, and we would work with him to make any adjustments or anything that he feels necessary to the plan. But if we have to plant a couple more trees, certainly not an issue on a site like this. We can certainly accommodate that, but we would work with him on satisfying his comments in regards to the landscaping. Just to touch on lighting really quick, there's a lighting plan in the submission package. We are going to have to remove the pole-mounted lights that are in the rear portion of the parking lot to install the canopies. We'll be installing underneath the lighting, which meets your parking which meets your standards for light levels in a parking lot in the rear portion of the lot. Those are bolted to the undersides of the canopies, and they're direct down lighting right onto the to the pavement. And that's part of the plans that have been submitted. Before I get into the variance, I just want to note in terms of the zoning, everything else basically complies with your bulk standards for zoning. The only variance that we have is the lot coverage variance that Mr. Simon already talked about at the beginning, and that number basically ends up becoming 0.2% increase over the 66 when you take out those couple foundations for this front canopy.
So Mr. Michelle, with regard to the variance relief that is required, as the board is aware, there's under 40:55D-70C, there's a hardship variance that is a possibility here under C1 of that statute, and then what they normally call a flexible C variance under C2, where there's an evaluation as to whether the benefits outweigh the detriments. With regard to the C1, which talks about an extraordinary situation uniquely affecting the property, including the current condition of the property, is it your opinion that due to the existing location of structures, buildings, and improvements on the property, that it is not possible to meet the ordinance requirement with regard to the impervious coverage, and the fact that it's already over what's permitted?
That is correct. Given the size of the property and the development that's occurred, you would not be able to meet that standard that's in your ordinance for 55% lot coverage.
And with regard to your proposed mitigation, whether it's the dry well or a small infiltration trench, is it your opinion professionally that type of installation would mitigate any even de minimis effects of going over by 0.2 what is otherwise required?
That is correct. By complying with that standard, you mitigate the 500 square foot increase in impervious surfaces on the site.
And with regard to any type of C2 benefits outweighing the detriments analysis, would you agree that solar installations as an inherently beneficial use under the municipal land use law certainly promotes the general welfare, and it's an appropriate location given this is an office complex, and it's also promoting the conservation of energy resources, which is another purpose of the municipal land use law?
That is correct, and it's an appropriate use for a parking lot where you have impervious surfaces already, and you're adding solar on top of those surfaces.
And with regard to the negative criteria for both the C1 and the C2 variance relief that is necessary for this application, is it your opinion that given the surrounding uses being commercial, industrial, hotel, non-residential, that certainly it will not be a substantial impairment or substantial detriment to the surrounding neighborhood?
That is correct.
Okay. And with regard to the master plan and the zoning ordinance, certainly the master plan calls for supporting renewable resources, including solar, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and in terms of the ordinance, given the fact that even with the solar array, the only variance relief that is required was a de minimis impervious coverage variance for 0.21, is it your opinion that it also does not cause a substantial impairment to the zoning ordinance?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, do you have anything else to add, Mr.
I think I
Mashallah?
just want to touch on briefly the review letters, just to put on the record. I think I already, just want to go through them really quick, just so we have that covered. There's a July 11th, 2019 letter from CME Associates, which is the board engineer, Township Engineer's Office, and we reviewed the letter, and I think I already talked about the stormwater and the eco-type grates, but the rest of the comments we have no issues with and would comply with them should they become conditions of an approval. There are some outside agency approvals. I wanted to mention that briefly. They listed in their letter here. We do have Somerset County Planning Board approval already. We have submitted to Somerset Union Soil Conservation District for, we're under that 5,000 square feet. We'll get a letter of no applicability from them, but we've made that submission. We haven't received it yet. And we have submitted to the Delaware Routing Canal Commission. They've reviewed it, and we need to go back to them with some additional information, but ultimately, we would have to obtain their approval as a condition of the application. So from the engineer's letter, we have no issues complying there. We have Mr. Healy's letter, Director of Planning. I've touched on that comment already, the June 27th letter. We can comply. We will work with him to comply with his comments as part of a condition of any approval. Then I talked about the June 26, 2019 letter from the Fire Prevention Director, John House. I touched on comment 1 and 2. We would comply with that. And number 3 is just a statement that he reserves the right to further review the plans, and we have no issue there. The rest of the letters from the Sewerage Authority, the Department of Health, the Traffic Safety Bureau, and the Department of Public Works had no comments, so there's nothing for us to do with those particular letters.
And with regard to the Environmental Commission, I believe that they stated that it's a quote-unquote beneficial use of the space and suggest others follow this example, and that slight increase in pervious coverage is greatly offset by the solar array.
I have nothing further from my direct testimony.
And I think we covered all the professional reports.
Are there any questions from board members?
Yeah, I have a question, Charles Brown. I am aware of the many benefits of providing the solar to the site. However, have you considered that there is a perceived vertical visual clutter that happens when you outfit the parking lot with such solar installation, especially the fact that it's a lot of steel on the site? Have you considered outfitting that with some additional greenery to offset that visual clutter?
Well, that's what we're proposing to do. We certainly can't plant underneath the canopies.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Right, so we're looking to enhance the landscaping that's around the perimeter of the property.
I'm not speaking to that neither. I'm talking about the physical structure itself, either hanging greenery from it or some sort of way of outfitting it with it. I've seen other parts of the country where that has been the case.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that. I'd have to look into it and see what can be done.
Just something to consider. It's a lot of steel.
Understood. Usually, well, I'll take a look at it, but I don't know what. I have yet to see that done here in New Jersey. I'll say that.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Ted.
Well, with regard to what Mr. Brown just suggested, I think it would be difficult to water hanging greenery up there if you had a dry spell. I'm interested in the calculation of impervious surface in ways which I think would benefit you, and I'm wondering if it will obviate the variance. If you're putting in the foundations where you already have parking lot, then that's not an increase in impervious surface. The increase might be from removal of the planted areas. But if you're making pavement where the planted areas are. And I don't know whether you, this is almost a legal question, whether if you put canopy over what is now a pervious surface, whether that counts as increasing impervious surface, but in fact you're removing the canopy close to the building, so you're retaining what's definitely, I mean, at least some pervious surface there. Not that grass is very pervious, but it counts as such. So I'm just wondering if you really need the variance at all.
So I'm going to attempt to tackle this a little bit, and thank you for the comment, Mr. Chase, that actually under the municipal land use law, it is codified that the panels themselves are not to operate to count towards impervious coverage. So that's actually in the statute, not just even.
Good. I'm
Right?
glad to hear
So
that.
that's already said. That being said, we have throughout the state taken a conservative approach to that statutory authority by interpreting it to say, well, if we are still doing something to the foundation underneath the panels themselves, that to err on the side of caution, that is why we, in this case, for example, as in other cases, we do request the de minimis variance. But I'm speaking as a board attorney as well. If the board is inclined to make the determination, certainly, that no variance is required due to that statutory authority, that the solar panels themselves, because they are deemed to be inherently beneficial, and that's the background for why they're not included as part of impervious. If you think that also applies to the foundation, that's up to the board. But we're, again, trying to be conservative about it, and that's why we ask for the variance relief.
Well, where you're taking these ash trees and these other plants out, if you were to put in pervious surface, asphalt that's pervious there.
Well, but that,
Still counts.
but the panels will shed the water off to the side anyway,
But they don't count. The panels don't count. It's what's under it that counts.
Yeah.
We were taking the approach, there are a couple landscaped islands. I call them landscaped islands, and I'll go back to exhibit.
Yeah, there's one quite big
A2.
one
Yeah, you see,
with trees.
you see the one here, there's no
Yeah.
trees in this one, then there's one here with trees, and there's another one here with trees. I call them landscaped islands, but they're basically river stone that's in them already, so it's, you could call, I mean, we're treating it as pervious for the purposes of the calculation.
Okay.
Because if it was lawn, let's say they were lawn, then you would be putting a foundation there, it'd be impervious. So, I mean, that's where the coverage number really comes from, is when you put that foundation in that landscaped island. If it was a parking lot, like if it was this section of the parking lot here, where there's no landscaped island, that's already impervious, and the foundations don't add to the impervious number already.
We'd have to go back to the original approval to know whether the river stone there was counted as pervious or impervious. So maybe we better just drop the subject.
Since we're here tonight, we might as well get on with it. Are there any other questions by board members? Maybe we should open to the public.
I would move that this meeting be open to the public for a hearing on the application.
Seeing no
Second
one
the
coming
motion.
forward, I move to close the public session.
Second.
Oh,
We have to really give them a chance.
We should
We're-
have
we're
voted.
In the
pushing
context
forward.
of the second, we also kind of acknowledge nobody came forward. So let's try that one more time. We have a motion to open. Do we have a second on the motion to open?
yes, I second it.
Okay, we're now open to the public. All in favor? There we go.
Everybody in favor, aye.
All right.
Nobody coming forward.
Yeah, seeing no one coming forward, move the public hearing on this application be closed.
Second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, I'm willing to hear a motion.
Madam Chairman, with the changes that have been agreed to by the applicant, I would move that the application be approved.
Second.
Chairman, Councilman Chase,
Yes.
Mahir Rafiq.
Yes.
Cecile McIver,
Yes.
Robert Mettler,
Yes.
Mustafa Menzreh,
Yes.
Charles Brown,
Yes.
and Godwin Amalola.
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, we have barbecue tonight.
Do we?
Is that true?
They're not serving samples.
Get that with your boards, do you?
Okay. Was this speedy enough for you, Pete?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, Madam Chairperson. Peter Lanford appearing on behalf of the applicant Barbecue Tonight LLC. This is an application for site plan approval for the construction of a new restaurant at the property located at 3025 Route 27, Block 48, Lot 1. There is an existing building on the structure at the present time, which was a florist shop, which ceased operating a couple of years ago. My client purchased the property in 2017. This evening, I will be presenting the testimony of a representative of the applicant to explain the operation. I will have our architect, site engineer. We have our traffic consultant available in case the board has any traffic questions, and we have our planner. There are two variances that we will be seeking, actually, three variances that we will be seeking. We will review them with you. They're fairly insignificant variances, but again, we have a burden of proof with respect to those variances, and we'll provide those proofs. I will start with Mr. Dua.
You could look over at me. Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Sean, D-U-A, Dua. Address is 487 East Freehold Road, Freehold, New Jersey, 07728.
And if you could indulge me, how do you spell Sean?
S-H-A-W-N.
Perfect.
Mr. Dua, you are a representative of Barbecue Tonight LLC, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and Barbecue Tonight LLC owns the property, and they are in the restaurant business?
Correct.
And how many restaurants does either Barbecue Tonight or its affiliated companies own?
4 restaurants,
Okay, and they're all in New Jersey?
all in New Jersey.
Can you indicate where they are?
They're located primarily in Woodbridge.
Okay, and this is your first venture into Franklin Township?
Yes.
Okay, the restaurant that we are proposing is approximately 2,500 square feet. What kind of food will be served at the restaurant?
Indian and Pakistani cuisine.
Okay, and it is a sit-down restaurant?
Correct.
And we are proposing 66 seats in the restaurant, is that correct?
Correct.
It will be open 7 days a week?
Correct.
And serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or just lunch and dinner?
Just lunch and dinner service.
What are the hours of operation?
Estimated hours of operation will be from, I believe, 11 a.m. till 10 p.m.
And you are not applying for, nor will you be seeking a liquor license? There will not be any alcohol served at this facility?
No alcohol will be served.
Okay. The average stay of customers at your restaurant when they come to visit for lunch would be how long?
Lunch would be about a 30-minute stay,
And usually for dinner?
approximately 1 hour.
Okay. The maximum number of employees would be during the dinner hour, is that accurate?
Yes.
And how many employees would you have?
We're estimating 5 employees.
And does the restaurant offer, will the restaurant offer takeout?
Pickup service.
Pickup service?
Yes.
Okay, you do not deliver?
No delivery service will be handled.
Okay. With respect to deliveries that come to the restaurant, how do they get to the restaurant? In other words,
We will be facilitating all deliveries off-peak hours so that prep prep work can happen in accordance with the restaurant operation hours to service properly. Produce and meat deliveries will all be done primarily before operations commence.
And the meat deliveries will be done by your own company?
Yes, we have our own halal butcher shop.
And the deliveries will be basically in vans or,
We have a fleet of refrigerated vehicles, vans.
and there will be no deliveries by tractor trailer or anything of that nature?
No.
Okay. I have no further questions of this witness.
Do any of the board members have questions? Witness?
I have a question. I just want a clarification when you stated there will be no deliveries made, but there will be pickups. So via Uber Eats, DoorDash, that is considered a pickup, not a delivery?
Yes, I agree with you on that. However, we traditionally have never offered any of those services. We still do traditional pickup by customers.
Okay.
When would be the earliest you would have deliveries made?
As far as for our vendors,
Yes.
we can estimate deliveries can typically start. I mean, in my historical opinion, some deliveries would start approximately, like a produce vendor might come at 8 in the morning. But our in-house deliveries would come in as timely as possible to secure and make sure that the meat is as fresh as possible.
And nothing beyond 10 p.m. when you close?
Oh, no.
Okay.
All deliveries will be made during the daytime hours to ensure proper counting, so on and so forth.
Right.
One question, you had said no tractor trailer deliveries, how can you guarantee that?
Typically, this is based on experience. Our produce vendors usually come by refrigerated vans, the ones that we've been using, and all other, the spices are all spices that are brought in to our main commissaries that are existing. They're brought in boxes that come, so we distribute them ourselves, and the meats ourselves as well. So, and the Restaurant Depot comes in our vans as well.
Thank you.
My question is, what do you consider your peak hours for probably on a weekend, based on the volume of what you expect from your clients or customers?
Just to clarify the question, you're asking peak hours on the weekends?
Yes, please.
For our restaurant customers,
Right.
right? Estimate peak hours would be approximately 12 to 2 o'clock. 12 to 2 o'clock for lunch service.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, you can even shave, on a more conservative note, let's say 11:30 to 2:30. And then in dinner time, because of the varying schedules people have, we can start as early as 5:30 and go as late as 9:30, 10 o'clock. And 10 o'clock being that people will be leaving by 10, but we'd probably do last service by like 10, by like 9:15, 9:30 would be last orders.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking that question is in Franklin Park on 27, between the hour of 12 and probably 5 p.m. on Saturdays, that route is always congested. So I just want to be sure that you are not going to hide in terms of volume of traffic going to a restaurant and another sort of headache. That's the question.
And we will have our traffic consultant address that issue also.
Okay.
I have a question. Are you going to be closed after lunch for 1 or 2 hours, or is it going to be continuously open until?
We'll stay continuously open. While we don't expect a massive flow of traffic during that time, we still will stay open in case they have respectful of clients that want to come and pick up food for the evening. So we don't typically close any of our restaurants for purposes.
I don't think there are any other questions for this.
Okay, are we going to hold the public till the end?
Yes.
Okay. I will then move on to Mr. Testa.
If you could raise your right hand, over here. Right here. You got it. Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your business address for the record, please.
Sure. The name is Michael Testa, T-E-S-T-A, principal architect of the architectural firm Michael V. Testa Architect, Manalapan, New Jersey.
Michael, are you a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I'm a licensed architect in good standing in the state of New Jersey.
How long
And
have
you're
you-
accepted.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Testa, before you go into your testimony regarding this building and the plans that you prepared, what is your background with respect to designing restaurants?
We've done probably 50 restaurants. I've been open for business in my own practice for approximately 18 years now. We do inline restaurants and strip centers. We do freestanding restaurants. I've worked for actually an area developer that did Applebee's restaurants, Boston Markets. I've worked on Taco Bell's, McDonald's, and custom small boutique-style restaurants like the one we're presenting here.
Okay. Now, the restaurant that we are proposing this evening is approximately 2,500 square feet?
Originally proposed as
Yes.
2,500 square feet.
Okay. And the exhibit that's on the board to the left is a colored rendering of the building, is that correct?
Correct.
Can we have that marked A1? And do you have additional copies so we can hand them out to the board members?
Yes, we do. I brought 8.5 by 11s for each of the board members to have a closer look.
Can you describe the building that we are proposing and the materials that will be used?
Yes, just for the board's information, we've presented this project in front of the Historical Commission. We've had some comments back from the Historical Commission. We've made some adjustments to the building based on their comments, and our meeting went favorable as far as their review and approval of that meeting. We still have to need to return back with some... Did I lose it? There it is, okay. We still have to return back with some of the exterior finishes, but I can go through and tell you what we've changed.
You can pull that one out.
Okay, is that better?
Yep.
Sorry. The original building that we presented to the Historical Commission was a much taller building. The Historical Commission's feedback was that they felt that it was a little too large for the site. With that comment, we brought the building down in height. The highest point, which is the top of this tower element on the corners, is 30 feet, and the lower mansard roof in here is 22.6. The commission felt that that was very acceptable building proportions to the overall appearance of the building. With that, we've also explained to the commission that this roof will be a flat roof sloping to the rear of the property. It will have a parapet on all four sides to conceal all of the rooftop equipment. There'll probably be 2 or 3 pieces of HVAC equipment, a makeup air unit for the kitchen, and a couple of exhaust fans. All of those will be concealed from all 4 sides of the building. With respect to the facade, the image you're looking at here is if you were standing in the street on Route 27. This is the corner of the building right here on a side street going down to the residential area. You can see we have 2 different tower elements accentuating the corners of the building. The materials on the building of the tower elements are hard stucco plaster, not an EIFS. It's old school wire lath and cement plaster. We have some plastered trimmed elements in that, and as well as the corbelling along the top and arches and so forth, just to articulate some of the features of the building. The building is outlined with cultured stone veneer on all 4 sides of the building. The sides and rear, if you could just see vividly in the back right corner, we have a horizontal clapboard siding that's going to be hardy plank siding. It's a cementitious board, not vinyl. And we have a black aluminum style storefront window that has a vertical and a horizontal mutton inside to break up the glass panes. As far as other materials, we have a copper gutter or copper finished aluminum gutter that would be along the top of the tower elements on the corner. That will be a gutter and it'll drain onto the back roof. And we also have some copper flashing and coping materials along the top edge of the building as well. So we've actually spent some time and effort putting into some quality materials to really enhance the overall appearance of this building.
Okay, now, Mike, the original building that we proposed at Historic was a 2-story building. This is a 1-story building, and the 2 towers are basically elements of the building, but it is a 1-story building. Is that correct?
It's a 1-story building, and also by reducing the height, allows us a higher interior area, but also limits the ability to have a 2-story space.
Can you review the floor plans of the interior of the building?
Or in the board's package, we have a sheet PB1, which is a proposed basement. Providing that we have proper water table, we can have a basement area. We're looking to utilize the basement area as solely a staff area. We have some storage area, we have a prep area, we have a dishwashing area, a bathroom for the staff, and a freezer cooler, and maybe some storage racks will all be contained in the building. Mr. Lanford indicated that the building footprint was 2,500 square feet. Based upon the engineer's reports, we made some considerations to reduce that building size down to 2,419 square feet. So we've knocked 2 feet off the length of the building. So we went from 61 feet in width to 59 feet in width. That allows us some extra side yard. We've moved away from the retail property on the other side to give us some more space. So we took that into consideration, making that building gross foot area, that's the gross area, it's not net, of 2,419. So that being the first floor is PB1, I'm sorry, the basement.
And that PV1 is part of the plan set that was submitted in conjunction with this application?
Yes, sir. The next sheet, PB2, which is in the board set as well, is an approximate layout of the first floor plan. As you can see, we have a dining room area facing the Route 27 and side street. The entrance to the facility is at the back facing the parking lot. So you would park, enter into the building to a small reception area. You have toilet facilities, you have the kitchen in the rear left corner, and again with the door accessing to the rear parking lot for deliveries, garbage disposal, etc. That's also in a straight line with the stairwell going downstairs, so any deliveries can go straight down into the basement area. And like Mr. Dew indicated, most of the deliveries are small packages, and they will be handled up and down through the floors vertically. We have a small kitchen area indicated here with typical kitchen equipment for this type of restaurant, as well as a proposed seating layout for 66 seats. The seating layout is generous in area. We have it that way because of the interior finishes. We're going to have columns, other elements inside the space. We also like to combine tables for larger parties, and also we like to have open space for buffet tables and everything else. So we need some flexibility in the floor plan. Again, the building will be a completely energy efficient building. All equipment will be energy efficient as well.
Also, the building, as we show it now, does not have a sign on the building. Is that correct?
Correct, but we anticipate the sign to be in accordance with the ordinance. I think it's approximately 30 square feet. It'll be mounted between the two towers on the mansard roof.
Okay, and that was also discussed with the Historic Commission, and they had no problem with having the sign there?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, the mounting of the roof top, I think that's another variance.
If it is, we will make sure, we're allowed a freestand or an attached sign on the building.
But you can't mount it to a roof.
No, but we'll mount it where it's permitted, and if we don't, we'll have to come back for an approval.
Technically, it's a wall surface. It's not a horizontal plane. A roof would be an element or a structural element.
We're hearing this for the first time.
That's okay.
So I'm reacting on the spot to something that literally you're raising at the hearing.
Okay.
So that's what material is that?
It's going to be it's an asphalt material. It's going to look like a slate roofing material.
So that's what I'm reacting to, saying that it's on the roof, but you're telling me it's not a roof.
Technically, in structural terms, no. It's a vertical plane of the building. It's just accentuated to look like a roof. So if you could construe that.
Mark, to make it very simple, we went to the Historic Commission. They approved the location. If it's in your opinion that requires a variance, we will either come back for a variance and ask for that variance, or in the alternative, relocate the sign to a different location, which will be conforming with the ordinance, if you think that that location that we are now proposing is non-conforming.
I'll look up the ordinance as the hearing goes along.
I would comment that since its purpose is a parapet, that's a little more like a wall than like a roof.
The development of the parapet is a result of the conversation with the Historical Commission. The original design was a square box that was drive-it, that looked very modern and contemporary. In an effort to make the building look more residential and have more detail and be a little more articulated for a streetscape, that's how we incorporated that mansard. It sticks off the wall about 12 inches, but it is a veneered with a roofing material. But in theory, it is a wall surface that the Historical Commission had no issue with.
I have no further questions of Mr. Testa unless the board members.
Are there any questions from board members?
I have a question. The sign itself, what is it, a neat sign? What is the sign?
The neon sign is going to be an illuminated sign. We haven't designed that yet. It's going to, again, it'll be in conformance with whatever the requirements the ordinance has set forth. The sign allows to be neon in a sense. We'll do whatever the ordinance will allow us.
All right, well, we'll give Mark some time to, yes, Ted?
You have towers at the corners. Is there anything inside them at what visually looks like a second story?
Well, you're looking at the rendering from a 6-foot elevation from a street. If you look at the two-dimensional, which is PB3 of your board package, the front elevation, you can see it's not as severe. I'm just going to move this onto the other. If you look at the bottom left, elevation 3 of PB3, really the only elements, these here, it sticks up. This is 22.6, so it's 7.5 feet up. There's nothing in that area. It's just purely architectural decoration to help accentuate the corners of the building.
No, it's just that, you have those little things which, from this distance, look like windows. It implies a second-story space within. I'm just asking to be sure that there's not a used second-story space within.
I will testify that is the case. Those windows are actually above the roof line beyond. Remember, I'd indicate this parapet is approximately 4 feet high, so your roof line may be at this horizontal line on that tower, and inside the tower is probably a 12 by 12 footprint. It's just going to be empty space that's going to be concealed by a drop ceiling.
Okay.
What about pedestrian access along Route 27? There's a lot of walking in the area. There's no sidewalk proposed along 27 or any sidewalk connecting pedestrians to the entrance of your site. It is very car-centric in design, and given the amount of people that walk in that area, I would certainly be more favorable of a site that promotes walkability.
I'll let the engineer speak to the sidewalk, but the location of the door from an architectural standpoint was placed in an area where the majority of the pedestrian traffic would be, or the traffic or the users and customers would be entering the building was off of the parking lot. We also have a slight grade difference too, that if it was at the front of the building, I'd wind up with stairs and a ramp and it would start to get unsightly in that area. But I do understand your concern as far as pedestrian access off the road. So I'll let Mr. Razumowitz discuss the access for pedestrians.
So I'm having trouble finding the exact section of the ordinance. There is, in my report, I had mentioned as well the commercial design standards, which speak to a number of different things, but one of them does talk about sign design and addressing, incorporating signage into the architectural design of the building and not tacking a sign into places where you wouldn't ordinarily see them. Ordinarily, placement of signs on roofs or things that look like roofs are discouraged because they look tacked on. You didn't think about where you were going to put the sign, so you just threw it on the roof. And our commercial design standards certainly speak against that, notwithstanding the verbal conversation that may have been had with the Historic Commission. So I don't know if you have a response to that.
Mr. Haley, we could build a flat surface that protrudes outward. To me, would look more like a improper architectural element than having that sign mounted in that area. I think it blends perfectly. You have a dark contrasting color behind the sign. It's framed by two vertical elements on each side. I think it's a perfect location for the sign. If that roof was not there, it would be a flat wall, which would be perfect location for that sign. We've just upgraded the materials of the surface that sign would be mounted to, and we feel is well appropriately placed. We don't want to put it on the tower elements, taking away from some of the architectural detail and trim. So that's how we came up with that location.
I don't know if the board can visualize what's being verbally described to you. I
can.
leave that to the board.
I can, and I'm in agreement with Mark.
Okay.
I don't see any problem with lowering the sign to just above the glass
Yeah, toward the
windows
middle,
there.
right.
Yes,
here.
right
That
there.
spot.
that area.
We could possibly do something that would hang down from the soffit element that would be illuminated. It would have two poles. You see that a lot in commercial architecture today, where you have these blade signs that either stick off the sides of a building or hang down.
Or attached to the sides, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think rather than to belabor this at this point in time, I would suggest that we not seek approval of the sign in the location testified to by Mr. Testa. We will have a further conversation with Mr. Healy as to his opinion as to, when we get the detail, as to whether it is permitted where we are proposing it or it is not permitted. And if it is not permitted, we will come up with an alternative location, or in the alternative, we always have the right to return here and show it to the board and ask for variance.
That's fine.
Are you going to speak to the freestanding sign, or is that going to be
The site
the
engineers will
engineer?
testify to that.
There are no other questions you have?
Okay, Mark?
Thank you.
Over here, do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Mark Razimowicz, spelled R-A-S-I-M-O-W-I-C-Z. I'm employed at Center State Engineering, 481 Spotswood English Town Road, Monroe Township, New Jersey.
Mr. Razimowicz, are you a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey?
I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of New Jersey, and currently my status is good.
You're accepted.
Okay. Do you also serve as a consulting engineer for any municipalities?
Yes, I currently serve as the city engineer for the city of South Amboy, as well as the township engineer, planning board engineer, and zoning board engineer for Monroe Township in Middlesex County.
Okay. And your office, under your direction, prepared the site plan that is the subject of this application. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. First of all, can you indicate to the board what are the existing conditions on the property?
Certainly. The display I'm putting up is part of your plan set that was submitted. Sheets 1, 2, and 3 of 8 are going to be provided. And then I also have a handout, if I may.
And before I hand it out, can you indicate what the handout is?
So the handout is a color rendering of the plan that was submitted to the board. Again, highlighting the landscaping and the parking. But essentially, it is the plan that was provided, colorized.
I will mark that as A2. Mr. Vignolo?
If you could add today's date also. It's still August 7th, as well as the application number, which is PLN-19, 4 zeros and a 5.
Okay, you can proceed as to the existing conditions.
Okay, existing conditions, this is a vacant one-story dwelling, recently used as a florist. I believe it was called the Potting Shed. It's located at 3025 Route 27 in Franklin Park. The cover sheet indicates the location area at the corner of Route 27 and Clover Place. Sheet 2 of 8, which is in your set. The property is located in the NB Neighborhood Business Zone as well as the Franklin Park Local Historic District. It's lot 1, block 48 consists of 15,674 square feet. We're proposing to demolition all the buildings on the property and clearing the site, leaving some of the trees in the back corner, however. We're proposing to construct a 2,500 square foot restaurant with 66 seats. It's a one-story building and a basement as discussed with the architect. Site improvements.
Go
Site
ahead.
improvements, I'm sorry. Okay, site improvements, we're proposing to construct 22 parking stalls, and they're located in the rear of the building with access off of Clover Place. Proposing a landscape wall along the property line with the adjacent property on Route 27. Primarily that is due to the elevation changes and the grade in that area. It's approximately a 1.5 foot to 2 foot high maximum wall. We're also proposing an underground stormwater basin, detention basin, which is shown on sheet 3 of 8. It consists of a number of stormwater inlets, underground storage along the Clover Place side as well as along the frontage of the Route 27 side in the grassed area alongside the building in the parking lot. There's also proposed landscaping that we're providing on the site. It's located both along the frontage, the sides, and adjacent to the residential dwelling to the rear of the property. We're providing approximately 5 ornamental street trees, 17 evergreen trees, 41 evergreen shrubs, and a number of ornamental grasses.
Okay, Mark, dealing with certain specifics, the fence to the rear of the property adjoining, there's a residential dwelling to the rear of us, is that correct?
Correct. That's in the northwestern property line.
And the fence will be a solid fence?
We're proposing a 6-foot-high solid vinyl fence along that entire property line.
Okay. And this evening, did we have a conversation with the property owner that owns the property to the left of us, which is also a shopping center, is that correct?
Yes, the property to the west.
Okay.
That's correct.
And that owner had requested that we also, there's an existing fence between our property and his property at this time, and he's asking that we put up a new fence along our property line.
We can accommodate removing that existing fence, which is somewhat worn down and dilapidated, and installing the same 6-foot-high vinyl stockade fence.
Okay, so that will be an addition, a new addition to the plan as a result of the request of the owner of that shopping center, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, what kind of lighting are we proposing outside?
We're proposing 2 LED lighting for the parking lot. One is located along the rear property line, illuminating the parking area. One's proposed along Clover Place side of the parking lot, again illuminating the parking area. And they are LED lights.
And the one to the rear, will it be directed so that there will be no light spillage to the residential property to the rear of us?
That's correct. There'll be no light spillage, and additionally, we can provide a shield on the back of that light to help reinforce that there's no spillage.
Okay. There is also an area toward the rear of the property for refuse. Is that not correct?
That's correct. We're proposing a trash enclosure in the westerly corner of the property. 10 by 10 trash enclosure. Originally, I believe we had it fenced in. We are now going to be providing a wall enclosure. So it'll be a wall to match the, similar to the architectural of the building.
Okay. And in addition to enclosing it with a wall, there's also going to be some additional landscaping and planting around the that enclosure. Is that correct?
Yes, we propose a number of plants around there, as well as we're trying to preserve the few trees behind that enclosure, the existing trees.
Okay. Now, the original plan that we submitted did not propose any sidewalks, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and is there an ability to have a sidewalk along Route 27?
Yes, originally we didn't have any sidewalks proposed. There is some right-of-way located along 27. That's something that could be reviewed with the state to see if that can be accommodated.
So if the board felt that sidewalks were appropriate along 27, we would have to get approval of the state DOT, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But if the board wants them, we would be willing to put sidewalks in along Route 27?
Certainly, we can accommodate that, and it would be provided with a handicap accessible ramp at the corner, which would be required as well.
Do you have an opinion as to the appropriateness of any sidewalks along Clover Place?
Well, we didn't propose sidewalks because it's in keeping with that neighborhood. There's no sidewalks in that area. Series of stormwater drainage ditches on the one side, and on the other side, the grass comes right to the roadway. So we weren't proposing any sidewalk there.
Okay, and we would ask the board not to require us to put sidewalk there, is that correct?
Yes, we would ask for the waiver of the sidewalk along Clover Place.
Let me just comment. I can tell you, I know there's no sidewalks, but just, the township has received a lot of complaints from neighbors in that area about the lack of sidewalks. I'll just leave that to the board to understand that.
If I can add to that, we're also providing some road widening along here. Right now, there's no curbs in that area. We are proposing to curb and tie into the curb at the corner at Route 27.
And also, is there an extensive landscaping plan along Clover?
Yes, as you can see in the color rendering that was handed out, we're providing a number of evergreens and a few ornamental type trees along Clover Place. Some are in the right-of-way and some are on our property.
Would some of that landscaping be jeopardized if a sidewalk had to be constructed there?
Well, certainly the room for the street trees would, you wouldn't have room for those trees. What we have on our property is the storm drainage system is underground in that grassed area. So trying to move street trees over that facility would compromise the underground stormwater basin.
So we had a balancing act, and the board's going to have a balancing act as to whether the landscaping and the trees are more appropriate than the sidewalk, because both of them cannot be accommodated. Is that a fair and accurate statement?
That's fair. Also, I believe one of the comments was with regard to the landscaping within the right-of-way. That we do have some proposed in the right-of-way, and again, due to the location of the stormwater facilities, that's really the only area we can provide it. We could provide some supplemental landscaping along the frontage of a few of these parking stalls.
And again, for the record, we are proposing 22 parking stalls, which is the requirement pursuant to the ordinance based on the seating within the building. Is that correct?
Correct. 22 parking stalls, 9 by 18 stalls, 1 ADA compliant stall. We're in compliance with your ordinance for 66 seats. It's 1 per 3 seats.
Okay.
Just one question. Can you explain why the stormwater facilities are proposed in that area as opposed to another area of the site? For example, is there a reason why it couldn't be placed under the parking lot?
It could for maintenance purposes. It's any type of maintenance is easier to be done within the grassed area, and obviously if there was an issue that it had to be dug up, you're not digging up your parking lot.
So, so the constraint that you're talking about in terms of the sidewalk and the landscaping is resulting from your choice to put the stormwater system in that location?
Well, if we had put it underneath the parking lot, again, it becomes an issue with maintenance. If it has to be dug up now, we're ripping up our parking lot. So, for maintenance purposes, obviously working in the grass areas, it's providing some infiltration over the grass areas. We had conversations with your board engineer with regard to the stormwater. So it was suggested, and we're going to work with him to do some test pits out there to see if we can get percolation in the soils. Based on what we looked at, it appeared, we didn't do test pits, but based on some of the soil data that's out there with the county, it didn't appear that we would get good infiltration out here. So that's why we proposed a underground detention system. Again, in conversation with your engineer, there may be an opportunity to get infiltration as well, just based on some soil tests and doing some test pits. So we agreed that we would work with him to do some soil borings out there beforehand to see if we can modify the stormwater system to possibly reduce the size, get infiltration out there as well. And then with the infiltration, ideally with that, you'd like to have it in the grassed areas.
How do you propose persons with disability assess your site other than by vehicle?
I'm sorry?
Persons with disabilities, persons in wheelchair who are visible in that area, how do they get to your site absent arriving via a car?
Well, we're providing the handicap parking stall in accordance with the ordinance.
Absent via a car, how do they get to your site?
I'm sorry? Absent
Without
a car?
a car.
Well, right now, they don't. If there's a sidewalk, they would utilize a sidewalk. We possibly could provide a connection to the building from that sidewalk.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So my concern is that currently, as designed, you don't provide a sufficient way for a person in a wheelchair, persons without car, to access the entrance to your building.
You're talking access to the site, to the building.
Into the front door.
To the building, if they're in the parking lot, they can get into the building.
If they arrive by car.
Correct.
If they arrive by foot or in a wheelchair, how do they get to the front of the building?
Well, based on our plan, they don't. But there's no access to get to our property. There's no accessible access to our property from any adjacent properties out there.
Right, so I would not be in favor of any plan that doesn't allow full access for all people.
Can we have a walkway from the sidewalk on Route 27, assuming the state allows us to construct it, through our property so that they can access the building?
We could get it from Route 27.
We also have one on Clover Place where you can potentially, those are canopy trees, I assume, that you're proposing?
Some of these are smaller ornamental type trees.
Right.
There was some in one of the reports with regard to the trees and looking for the requirement to meet the requirement for deciduous trees.
Mm-hmm.
So we can certainly accommodate that in these locations.
So do you think, going back to the original question, that you can accommodate a 5-foot or 4 to 5 foot sidewalk along with those trees in that area?
Along Clover
Yes.
Place? No, we could not.
What would be sacrificed for the sidewalk?
We'd lose the trees.
Why couldn't the trees be moved closer to the parking lot on both sides of this parking lot so that the cars in the summertime in particular would have the shade?
The one we could possibly move in here, in this area again, is our stormwater system, our underground stormwater system. The access, to go back to the ADA access, there's no ADA access coming from the adjacent properties. By providing a sidewalk here, assuming someone in a wheelchair gets to that sidewalk, we can provide access into the building. By putting a sidewalk here, that doesn't get them into the building. So you would get them to the driveway and then they would come in. So that's sort of redundant, but we certainly could get a sidewalk in coming from Route 27.
At a minimum. That would be
at a
preferred.
minimum.
Right.
Yeah, I think additionally to what he's saying, I remember somebody mentioned that there are going to be people coming for other items, right? Don't you think it would be judicious for you to have something like a good set of sidewalk around the building? Because people are coming to pick their orders, right? So that will enhance the performance of that restaurant. if that is-
Again, it's accessible by vehicle, as was pretty much discussed. So if someone picking up the order is
Right.
coming in by vehicle, that's the typical customer.
Typical customer.
But again, sidewalk coming at it here, there's no sidewalk. So if someone's walking here, one of the neighbors are coming in, they would come into the parking lot and walk right into the sidewalk, just like if you got out of your car in this corner. You would walk through the parking lot and the accessible route right into the restaurant. If you're coming from somewhere on Route 27, by providing a sidewalk along 27 and making a connection to the building, then that's your accessible route.
Right.
It's a matter of grading. I would have
Right.
to verify the grading and obviously with the state's approval to make that accessible.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I do.
Yes.
I have a comment, a concern, and the comment going to what's being discussed about handicap access, right? So I know that area pretty well. I'm sure most of us here also. But those restaurants in that area don't have walking sidewalks coming into the restaurants. So I'm a little puzzled. I mean, I'm all, you having a handicap access. So if you put a sidewalk there, comparing apples to apples, the other strip malls or the restaurants don't have a sidewalk entrance. They're all vehicle entrances. So I'm having a little difficulty processing the apples to apples. So that was a comment. My question is, are you going to be having outdoor seating area? Any?
No.
And my other concern is, I see two lights, but on the opposite end, there are no lights. So the concern is for safety, where number 11 is, right here.
So the site lighting we proposed is shown on sheet 3 of 8. There's 2 lights.
Right.
It meets your requirements of lighting the parking lot. So this light fixture is located on the Clover Place side, so the light illuminates out across the parking lot. So it meets the requirement and not having the spillage, keeping the spillage to a minimum at the property line.
So from safety concern in winter, just having a little bit of a concern because this is quite a number of cars there.
Correct. It does meet the requirements of the ordinance for lighting. Additionally, there'll be some lighting on the building near the entrance ways as well, but we don't accommodate, we don't take that into account as part of the parking areas.
Okay.
Question, actually. About Clover Place. Oh, I don't know. I turned it on before and it's not, okay. As regards Clover Place, I believe we have or have had recently an application for the other side of Clover Place.
If we do, maybe they went to historic, but I don't believe we have an application in the planning zoning department
Yeah,
for site plan approval yet.
I think it might have been historic, that they.
Maybe they're just starting there. I'm not personally aware of an application across the street.
Yeah, I think there is one coming.
I think that's a couple of lots further up.
Oh.
The one that was before the Historic Commission,
okay.
the building we'd like to preserve. But between that building and Clover Place, there was a house that Bruce Williams came in and asked us permission to take down, and
Yeah,
it's been
right.
taken down.
Yeah.
And then the house on the corner is Bruce Williams's house, so he still owns it. I think he's basically in Florida.
I'm sorry to say he passed away.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, some time ago. I'm not sure the status of the property now.
Yeah, the property on the corner, which is a house, we have not received an application
Good.
involving that property.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Miller, the property that you're referring to, I think, is 3 lots removed. I was at the Historic Commission on that.
Meeting, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I don't know of anything that's going on the other corner. I know that lot is for sale, but I don't think there's any activity on it right now.
No, okay, very good. I guess the reason I brought it up is we may get a chance for a sidewalk on Clover Place on the other side, should there ever be an application for that corner. But I too would, all things equal, if it were easier to do on this property, a sidewalk on Clover Place would be a nice thing, for a number of reasons.
Again, it can be accommodated. It would result in those trees we can't do both. So again, if the board feels that the sidewalk is more important than the trees, it can be done.
Okay.
Well, I think what you've really said is that you're proposing the underground detention basin and the trees, and if you have both of those in that green stretch, you can't have a sidewalk. If the underground detention basin were under the parking lot, and we get many applications where the underground detention basin is under the parking lot, then there would be room for trees and sidewalk. But I certainly feel the most important thing is to have a sidewalk along Route 27, because people walk as far as from the 2 apartment developments half a mile up the road, walk down to Franklin Park. You can see they've worn a track there. And it's something I'd really like to see is sidewalks the whole length of Franklin Park along 27. And at least if we have an application with 27 frontage, I would insist on sidewalks along the 27 frontage. The state would probably be happy that I'd stop asking about them building the sidewalk along the frontage.
If you recall some years ago, when I did the IHOP down the street, this board had requested sidewalks along the frontage of the IHOP, which, and it was an ordeal, but we did get the state to agree to allow that sidewalk to be constructed, so it can be done on 27.
Yeah. And it wouldn't have great connectivity, but it would be only a few steps into the parking lot of the strip mall next door. And then, unfortunately, that's mostly what we have along 27 is parking lots in front of the building. So.
And to clarify, the engineer did not say that he had to sacrifice the drainage on Clover for the sidewalk. He stated that the trees would be sacrificed.
That's correct.
So it's not a comparison of whether we should have sidewalks or trees. It's about providing access for all people. And in this particular neighborhood, a lot of people do walk. And believe it or not, there are a lot of people who do not own cars. So we're going to be promoting design in this community that is for the community. It should be one that is amenable to everyone being able to access that building by foot, not just by car. So who are we really designing this for is the question.
And again, I think that's a valid point. And again, the sidewalks can be provided along Clover Place.
Yes, but let's not make it a comparison of a sidewalk versus a tree. It's actually access for all people versus the trees, not the sidewalk.
I understand your point, but the sidewalk has to go someplace along our property line, and if it does go there, we also have additional landscaping there. We have our stormwater management there. the street trees cannot, we can't do all of it. And so those may have to be sacrificed if the overriding and overarching issue is accessibility. And that's the board's decision.
Understood.
Well, I think.
You can't or you don't want to. I mean, it's not a matter of can't. I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but let's just be clear with our words. It's not you can't.
Well,
you prefer to have the stormwater basin
No.
there for the reasons the engineer
was-
stated.
there
He
are-
didn't say you can't do it.
There is a reason we selected that location. We have the right to put a stormwater detention basin in that location. Sure, it could go under the parking lot, but there are reasons why that location was selected. And actually, there was a conversation today between our engineer and your engineers as far as that location. And again, there are benefits to having that stormwater management in that location, and that's why it was selected. It's not that we couldn't do it someplace else, but there is a reason why we selected that location. One is for our own benefit, but also for better stormwater management for infiltration.
Just to clarify, if we put the sidewalk along Clover Place, you said we'd lose 2 trees and keep 1.
I'm sorry? I apologize.
If we were to put a sidewalk along Clover Place, we would lose 2 trees and keep 1 tree? You said we'd keep 1 tree?
Yes, the one,
Closest
we
to the
may be able
entrance.
to squeeze it in.
Yes, so we'd lose 2
We
trees.
may be able to sneak this one in. I have to look at site triangles. These
Okay.
two would have to go. The other question about the sidewalk that I have to raise is, it will not all fit within the right-of-way. Near the corner, if you see on the sketch, our property line essentially goes right to the curb. So I don't know if you permit sidewalks to be on private property and easements or not. But our property, the way it stands, would not accommodate it at the corner because of the property line. That's also, as I mentioned before, when we go to the state to see whether they'll allow it out there or not, or if they're going to make us give a right-of-way, additional right-of-way, which now in turn reduces the size of our lot even further.
Okay, Mark?
I was going to refer to the attorney. I mean, I've
Okay.
seen sidewalk easements. I mean, usually they're within rights of way, but
Well, no, if you have a sidewalk easement, if it's in the right of way, you don't need an easement.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
I'm saying
so-
usually
right,
sidewalks
usually-
are in the rights of way.
exactly, I mean-
I have seen sidewalk easements on occasion.
You certainly can have an easement for that location.
That
It's done-
is
yeah.
resolvable, yes.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
yep.
And again, I think we would need to have conversation with your engineer, and I'm sure we'll get all of that worked out if that's the board's desire.
All right, are there any more questions for this witness?
I just have a couple, because I hadn't
okay.
finished,
I'm sorry,
questioning.
go
it.
ahead.
If I can just, I'm sorry for clarification on the sidewalk, not to keep it going. If it is that provided on Clover Place, then I would suggest that a connection from the sidewalk to the Route 27, is not a good thing to have at that point, as one of the board members had said. It's not a requirement to connect to the sidewalk in front, but if it is provided on Clover Place, then that would not be necessary. That's all I'd just like to point out.
Mark, just a couple other issues. There are some variances that we are seeking. We will have Mr. O'Brien opine as to the basis of the variance, but can you briefly just point out the variances?
Sure. The variances are listed on the cover sheet, sheet 1. Variance for lot area where we have 15,674 square feet. That's our existing lot. Your zoning requires 20,000 square feet. Also for lot frontage along Route 27, we have 91.67 square feet, and the ordinance requires 100 square feet. Our planner will talk more about that, but these are the existing lot lines. There's no additional land to buy adjacent to it. We're up against Clover Place, so, and next door is a commercial site that's already developed. Additionally, the proposed variance, we have building front yard setback by, let me switch to sheet 2. So the front yard setback that we're proposing is 17.52 feet for the building, and your ordinance requires 20. Where that is, it's not along 27, it's not even along Clover Place near the front of the building. It's actually in the rear back corner of the building. The setback from that corner to the right-of-way line is 17.52 feet, where the ordinance requires 20. Additionally, the side yard setback variance to the commercial site to the west, for the building setback, the requirement is 10 feet from the property line. We're proposing 4. Now, as the architect testified, we're reducing the building by, I believe, 2 feet. So that 2 feet, that 4 now actually becomes a 6-foot setback. So we're making that less invasive and making that closer to the 10 feet. But so it goes from 4 feet to 6 feet. Additionally, we have a freestanding sign, 2 freestanding signs. The one in the front conforms to the setback requirements of 20 feet from the property lines. However, we have a directional signage at the entrance of the facility. Again, providing direction, that is 5.38 feet from the property line, where 20 feet is required. And again, that, I'm sure the planner will talk more on it, but due to the location of the driveway, that's not something that you could have further away from the roadway. Obviously, it's providing a directional arrow to come into the parking lot.
And that sign is a sign that is basically 4 feet in height, with a pedestal, and the sign itself is 2 feet by 2 feet? And that's on sheet 6 of your plans?
That's correct.
Okay. And the sign that is in the front of the building is a conforming sign, both as to the setback and also as to area?
That's correct, and that's the site identification sign.
Okay. Now, you've had an opportunity to review certain staff reports that were generated in conjunction with this application, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. The 2 critical reports are the report of CME, which was dated July 22nd, 2019, and did you in fact have a telephone conference, I guess it was yesterday, with Mr. Russo and also
Darren?
And Darren, to review the comments contained in his report?
That's correct.
Okay, and all of the comments you discussed, and we can resolve all of their issues and concerns?
Yes, our conversation, I spoke a little bit briefly about test pits. We're able to accommodate all their comments, and we would be looking to sit with your engineer and work out any of the concerns you've got, and to meet everything to his satisfaction.
Okay, now with respect to addressing those comments, those changes to the plan or modifications would not result in any significant difference as to what the board is looking at this evening on the exhibits. Most of those are technical changes. Is that fair to say?
Yes, mainly, as I mentioned before, the stormwater management facilities. Again, your engineer feels that getting some accurate test pits out there before before construction, that we may be able to modify the stormwater basin to get some infiltration, again, reducing the size of the basin, and that helps with the sidewalk that we were discussing as well as some of the landscaping.
Okay. And then you also had an opportunity to review Mr. Healy's report dated July 10th, 2019. I believe we have discussed or address all of his comments and concerns, either with your testimony or Mr. Testa's testimony, and obviously there will be some planning testimony that will be coming forward. Mark, is there anything that we didn't hit on yours?
Yeah, I would suggest, starting on page 3, commercial design standards, starting at comment 4B, and then I would suggest going through each of those comments.
Okay. Again, we are not providing any loading, is that correct?
No, there's no loading area. Again, it was
Okay.
testified as to the vans that would be delivering goods.
So they would basically park in the travel aisle, unload, and
Before the restaurant's opened, correct?
then they'd have to back up backwards through the site?
They're vans, they don't have to back up.
Well, there's room for, there's van parking, so a van can park in the parking stall, and I believe it was testified that it was before the restaurant actually opened, so most of those stalls should be vacant.
Okay.
Okay, and we are not proposing any bicycle parking?
We are not proposing bicycle
Okay.
parking.
And did you look at the parking design standard for dead-end aisles? Did you try to design this parking lot to eliminate a dead-end aisle?
Yeah, we looked at that, trying to have a driveway in, a driveway out. It just, the site is so very small. It's just a very small site. What we accommodated, the way we set up the handicap parking area, let me go up to the plan. So the accessibility to get into this handicap parking stall and back out, there's plenty of room to do that. This parking stall gets a little tight, but we provided the hatched area at the end of this aisle so that if needed, they would be able to back out and get out cleanly with easy maneuverability.
Okay, and as testified to, we are not proposing any outdoor seating areas of any kind or any outdoor plazas, and I believe this section more deals with a shopping center size site rather than a 15,000 square foot site. Is that correct?
Yes, we're not proposing any outdoor seating.
Okay, and we've discussed landscaping. Again, given what the testimony you heard, if a few of the trees come out, we can put some additional landscaping adjacent to the parking lot?
That's correct, and I did have a brief conversation with the engineer on it, and I believe he deferred to the planner. But there are areas we can accommodate, so we'd certainly work with your staff to again, beef up probably this area. It's where the cars would be parking. You have some headlights to sort of block that from going on to Clover Place.
Plus, if you have a sidewalk along Clover, would you have then this area extend to the sidewalk?
That would be an easier connection than
Yes.
trying to go to the front.
Right,
So
right.
that could be more accommodated. Again, I just have to look at the grading in there, to make sure it's properly accessible.
Yes.
The elevations.
What the language.
And I'll work that out with your staff.
Yeah, and what
as
the
well.
language of the ordinance says is that it encourages a low continuous landscaped hedge or low decorative masonry wall. And basically the intent is to have something somewhat continuous along the street and blocking views of the parked cars. So does your plan accomplish that? Can it accomplish that?
We can accomplish that in this area of the parking lot. And I believe that would meet the intent, and, certainly we can work that out with you and your staff.
All right.
Again, at the head-on parking, right through this area. It's basically, I believe, where we're both talking.
That's correct.
I believe we discussed the trash enclosure, and we will modify the plan to make it consistent with the ordinance, the mechanical equipment screening.
The architect addressed
Address
that.
that. Exterior lighting, can you just briefly touch on the fixtures that we are using and indicate whether they're compatible with the building and the other?
I believe they are. They're LED type shoebox fixtures. There's only 2 in the parking lot, and I believe the pole is. I don't see the color, but if there's a particular color that we can blend it in more with the building, whether it's black or bronze, I think the black pole would probably look nice, but we can talk with the architect to make that blend in.
I had a question about the lighting fixture. You showed two lights that illuminate the parking lot, and the foot candles, of course, meet the code. My concern, which is similar to the concern that was brought up, is near the trash enclosure, that there may be a shadowing effect that will create darkness. And given that you have limited visibility from the rear of the building, there's only one window, and that's near the entrance of the door. There's not a good sight out into the parking lot, and if there's a shadow effect near the trash enclosure, it's the proper place for attempted robberies to take place.
So I believe you're referring to the one stall really right in this area.
Right, so when you look at the placement of the light, given that the trash enclosure is a vertical element, there could potentially be a shadowing to the south of that, and that may not be captured by the light fixture that you have near number 7.
We would have to look at that a little bit more. I mean, the wall is I believe we had a 6-foot-high fence, so with a
Right.
6-foot-high wall, there would be some shadowing down low. I just have to look at the comparison of the height of the fixture, the light fixture, compared to that wall and carry it out. It may end up being a very small portion back in here, down into this corner.
Yeah, and
But we can look
that's
at
my
it.
biggest concern when you look at where the door entrance is. The people working internally will not be able to look out necessarily to that location based on where the reception desk is located internally. So there's no
It's something
eyes.
I'd certainly look to work out with your staff. I don't know, even putting a light on this side, you still end up with, a similar situation. But that's something we can look at and try to work out to accommodate. The other thing is, you don't want to overlight it. I know what you're saying about a safety concern here, but if we overlight the whole parking lot, you're in a residential neighborhood right next door, and so there's a balancing act. So,
I understand.
we can look at that.
I want you to achieve balance, but there's also a science called crime prevention through environmental design. And it will cover the need to make sure that that shadowing effect is mitigated and that you have the eyes on the parking lot. Because right now, people may not be in the view of anyone, given where the parking lot is located.
It's an excellent point that you raised.
I should think that parking spot is likely to be occupied by an employee of the restaurant, because usually you have the employees who arrive by car park as far away from the building as possible to let the closer ones be filled by the customers. Now, that said, I mean, even the employees also deserve protection from crime, but.
Yeah, we will take a look at that and see if we can achieve something that provides that protection.
Since we're talking about the trash enclosure, and Mr. Dua already agreed to, that there wouldn't be any deliveries of supplies before 8 in the morning, I'd like to see him agree not to having trash pickup because of the nearby residences before 8 in the morning.
I don't have a problem with that. Speaking to my client, he has one contract with a carter that does all his facilities, so I'm sure he can exert some influence as to when they would come and pick up the trash.
Okay, that's fine. Are there any other questions?
I think they're still in the middle of.
Okay.
I think you were on J. Bottom of page 4.
Mark, we will redesign the signs, the base of those signs. As a matter of fact, we talked about even lowering the one on 27 to make it a little lower, but we will incorporate a base on that sign to make it consistent with the building. So it won't be just a pole.
But one of the signs, the one that's on Clover, that's the one you're asking for the variance?
Right.
Is somebody going to present what that looks like to the board?
It's in the plan set, it's on page.
Provided on sheet 6 of 8. The plan shows it's a 2x2 sign sitting on a 2-foot pole. And we discussed instead of utilizing a 2-foot pole to hold the sign up, that it would be more of a masonry base to match the building itself. And the sign in the front, the site identification sign, already has a proposed base to match the building.
So, I think we're on 5A.
I think we've sort of discussed,
Yeah, I think you just discussed 5A.
Yeah.
5B,
obviously, we can't provide the 4 now because we're going to lose 2, and I don't think there's any other, again, putting the sidewalk on 27 does not afford the opportunity to put additional trees along 27, so I think that we're down to the trees that are left on the site, which are
The ordinance requires the 4 deciduous trees. And, I think we can get these 2 that we talked about earlier with the chairperson to meet that. Again, on Route 27, our stormwater facility is there as well. So we can accommodate 2 of those trees. So I don't know if that's a waiver we'd be seeking.
so in total, the site's going to have 2 trees.
2 deciduous trees, yes. And that would be a minimum of a 2-inch caliper. I believe we had shown 1.5 to 2 inch, so we'll modify that.
And then comment 6 is, we have a section of our ordinance that talks about, I don't know, the latest set of plans has those calculations?
we have
Minimal,
the plan set that we submitted has the lighting on.
We did not provide a point-by-point analysis, but we do show the foot candle levels. And that's something, as the board member discussed about the area of the enclosure and casting a shadow. So that was something we were going to look at and to do a point-by-point analysis over there, taking that trash enclosure into account to see how much of a shadow and a reduction of those light levels there is.
what I'm hearing then is I think you're asking for a waiver from that as well, because there's a section of our ordinance that talks about ratios between maximum and minimal levels, average and minimal levels, the overall average foot candle level throughout the parking lot. I don't recall seeing those calculations on the plan.
No, based on the size of the area and then we're only providing 2 lights, we would be looking for a waiver.
Okay, then I'll skip to 7C. How would access to the trash enclosure occur? Seems to be blocked by those 2 parking spaces.
The access to the trash enclosure, the trucks would pull straight in. The area here, the cans will be pulled out, loaded, and the truck would back out onto Clover Place.
No further questions.
And I'll finish, Mr. McIver.
Okay, any members of the board have questions?
One more attempt to get a street tree. On your plans, the Route 27 frontage, you have a group of 4 DT Daphne Transatlantica closer to, on the Route 27 frontage, closer to Clover Place. I should think if you put a street tree there instead of the Daphne, it would be clear of your underground detention facility, at least as shown, and it would be clear of the sidewalk. I do see a problem about sidewalk along Route 27 in that there's a 8-inch sanitary sewer along in the right-of-way there. Have to figure out exactly where it can be put. The sidewalk can be put probably closer to your property line.
They can look at that. Sometimes, depending on the depth, I think of the sewer line. You can put pavement over sewer lines.
Okay.
Sorry, it depends on the depth,
Yeah.
I believe.
But how about putting a street tree up a little on the 27 frontage, closer to Clover, approximately where on page 3 you have the 4 Daphnes?
Greg, let me switch back. There's one thing that was missed on the rendering. There's actually a street tree proposed right in here on Route 27. It is shown on sheet 3 in this
Yeah,
location.
that's Amelanchier.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, it's more of an
good enough?
ornamental type tree, but we could get a deciduous tree in
No,
there.
I had raised the comment that some of the trees were more smaller ornamental and they should be proper street trees.
That's why I looked at you when I said that.
That's why I made that comment.
Yeah.
So we can accommodate that tree as well. So now we're at 3. And as far as the board member, these 4 plants here, the concern with that would be a site triangle issue at the corner and the proximity of putting a street tree that close. That would be a concern that we would have. So I'll modify the waiver of, instead of the 4 that's required under the ordinance for the trees, we can provide 3, 2 by the driveway entrance and then the 1 on Route 27. And I know your environmental commission asked it as well, to try to get a second tree in there, but we can't accommodate that with the site triangle. That would be the concern.
The branches should be above the level of sight from a vehicle.
We can explore it. There's also a water line in there, and and we can review that with your staff to see if something can be accommodated. I just can't commit to that 4th tree sitting here, but if we can accommodate it, certainly we will. I know the water department doesn't prefer to have trees directly over their water line, so that's something we can further discuss with staff.
What is it, the lines marked with Ws, is that the water line?
That is the water line, and you've identified the sanitary sewer line as well. That's out in the right-of-way.
I mean, I would think that the street tree shown actually on the Clover Place frontage, but very close to the corner, I would think that was a bigger problem for site triangle than one where the Daphne are.
The one on Clover Place is located behind the stop bar. So it's behind where you would stop for the intersection, so it is clear. But again, we can look at that to see if that can be squeezed in there.
Bye.
No other questions from the board? I'll take a motion.
I still have,
Did you have more
Oh, you
witnesses?
have more witnesses? Sorry. I thought you were done.
don't you wish? Yeah, I'll have Ms. Dolan, actually, I think based on what we've heard, traffic is not the biggest issue, but I'll just have her provide a brief summary of what would be expected with this project.
Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please.
Elizabeth Dolan, D-O-L-A-N, Dolan and Dean Consulting, 181 West High Street in Somerville, New Jersey.
She's accepted. She's been before this board many times.
Thank you.
You're suggesting that she's old and...
Okay. The numbers keep
Well, that
bigger.
suggests that I'm old.
Ms. Dolan, you prepared a report which we submitted in conjunction with this application dated May 17, 2019. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. In order to prepare that report, what did you do?
Talked to the applicant and the team regarding the type of restaurant operation that's proposed, performed some traffic counts during a weekday evening peak period when street volumes are highest and we would have peak dining hours, and performed an intersection analysis to test the levels of service with and without the site traffic from the restaurant. You've seen the plan. We have access on Clover Place. We don't have sufficient frontage for DOT to permit a driveway on Route 27. We wouldn't meet what they called corner clearance. So the site's been appropriately designed with that driveway as far as possible from the intersection with Route 27 to provide an appropriate parking lot and circulation. The traffic volumes in the weekday evening peak hour coming off of Clover are very low. We had 9 right turns in the busiest peak hour. And if you think about it, Clover Place is located between 2 traffic signals, so the folks in that neighborhood back there, if they need to make a left, they're probably using the signals at Bennington or at Claremont to the south. So low traffic volumes on the Clover Place approach to Route 27 means that there's capacity for the traffic generated by this restaurant. 66 seats, it's now less than 2,500 square feet, so this is a small restaurant space, and we're looking at about 16 cars coming in the busiest peak hour, 12 or 15 exiting during the peak hour. That's well below what traffic engineers call significant, and in fact, when we run all of that traffic through the intersection, not accounting for any pedestrian trips or people coming from the neighborhood, we calculate an acceptable level of service. It is a D at the bottom of the scale, but that's acceptable for an unsignalized location, especially when we've got now a total of only 21 vehicles coming on Clover to intersect Route 27. So that's a function of the high through volume, which I think was raised earlier by the board members. There's high traffic volumes on Route 27 through this area. But just for perspective, we've talked about the plaza just to the south of this site, that Dobbs Plaza. That's got 2 restaurants in it. Across the street, Raya, that's a much bigger center. We're a very small building, about 2,400. We're generating much lower volumes than those plazas nearby. And I think, too, there's an element of self-policing. You know, this isn't a mandatory destination like your place of work. If you choose to go here during a busier period, maybe you're going to do it when you're already traveling southbound and you're going to turn right and go southbound on Route 27. But certainly this isn't the only restaurant in town. There's plenty of other eating establishments in the area. But the analysis shows that the intersection can handle it without having to force people through the neighborhood to get to the signals. And certainly because the volumes are so low on Clover, there won't be any problem entering or exiting the driveway, and it is as far as possible from the intersection. You heard from the engineer, we're going to clean up Clover Place, fix up the pavement along our frontage because it is somewhat of a narrow road. So we also have ample parking. We don't think we need the 66 that are proposed, but that, again, meets your ordinance requirement.
Also, in your capacity as a traffic engineer, Mr. Healy alluded in his report that their ordinance discourages dead-end aisles. In your opinion, is there any reasonable alternative to the parking lot other than what is being proposed?
I don't think there is a reasonable alternative. I think it's appropriately designed. It would be a want versus a need to have that second egress point, but then we'd lose parking, we'd have another driveway, which is another conflict point on the street, and more importantly, a second driveway would be closer to the intersection. So since it's such a small lot, I think that it can function appropriately. And again, if the lot is full, that's a great problem for the applicant to have, but 66 is a very comfortable parking supply for such a small building area.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Well, just to clarify, it's 22 spaces.
22, 66.
I'm sorry, 66 seats and 22 spaces, right.
I have a question. You
Yes.
based the traffic off of, what's the code again in the book? The traffic generation manual.
Oh, the Institute of Transportation
Right.
Engineers Trip Generation Manual, right.
The other businesses that are operated in Woodbridge, are those numbers consistent with?
We didn't do a comparison with their other restaurants. The ITE manual has several restaurant land use categories, and this one is a busier one, more like, Chili's or any of the chains like that, and a lot of those have liquor licenses. This one will not, so the numbers are based on that land use category, which I think is pretty fair because there's an expectation of a somewhat high turnover, and I think the testimony was 30 to 60 minutes, and that's part of the ITE land use definition for this category we used.
Right.
Any other questions?
I think she directly answered my question.
Oh, good.
Mr. O'Brien.
Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Kevin O'Brien, O'Brien. Address is Shamrock Enterprises, Madison House, Madison Avenue in Rahway, New Jersey.
Mr. O'Brien is accepted also.
Okay, and you're
Thank you.
testifying this evening as a licensed professional planner, correct?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. O'Brien, I know we've been going on for quite a while. Our engineer reviewed the variances that we are seeking. Rather than repeat that, can you go through the proofs with respect to each of the respective variances that we are seeking?
Yes, the front yard setback on Clover Place, the existing setback along Clover is no more than 15 feet at the potting shed that currently exists. There's a row of buildings there. There's about 165-foot-long open curb cut. So this is not only an eyesore, not only non-conforming, but it's also very dangerous. Cars are parking right there in the right-of-way, backing out into the street. There's really no control there. Excuse me. The lot has an irregular shape. It's got slanting frontage along Clover, as you've seen from the site plan. This causes the back corner of the building to violate the 20-foot setback. But this is a tremendous improvement over what is there currently, as this is just one spot that violates the setback, and the front of the building does not. The side yard setback on Route 27, another variance that's been requested, or the left side of the building looking at it from Route 27. A 6-foot setback is proposed, 10 feet are required. As you've seen, this plan has evolved. Originally 4 feet were suggested, and now 6 feet are, which is an improvement of 2 feet. Makes the building smaller, gives a greater setback to the adjoining commercial property. And the adjoining commercial property has a drive aisle and a parking spot immediately against the property line to this building. So there's not going to be any impact to that. The sign setback from Clover, as you've seen on the site plan and what's been distributed this evening, the purpose of this 2-foot by 2-foot sign is to direct patrons to the parking lot. It's necessary. You've seen this in many other commercial developments where people are directed how to get into the parking lot so that they aren't wandering a street, they're not hitting their brakes unnecessarily. They have guidance, direction, they come into a parking lot cleanly. This needs to be somewhat close to the street so that people can see it. You've also heard from the site engineer about the number of constraints along Clover and that this is the appropriate location for it. So based upon that testimony, I think that this is the appropriate spot for it. A bulk variance, or C variances, that we're requesting this evening have to be reconciled with the negative criteria. And the first aspect of that is that we can meet several of the goals of the master plan. Among the goals that we do meet are, quote, encourage commercial development in established areas. And second, encourage new construction and renovation in developed areas. This is a developed neighborhood. The site itself has already been developed, and it's going to be renovated completely with a more appropriate use and a more appropriate building and site layout than currently exists. The second prong of the negative criteria is that the application show that there'll be no negative impact upon surrounding properties in the neighborhood. Stormwater management is not required for this project because it's not a major development. However, stormwater management is being provided here, which I think is a tremendous advantage to the neighborhood. Currently, the stormwater sheet flows off that 165-foot-long curb cut along Clover Place. This is going to be redirected, curbed, put into the stormwater detention basin, and that's going to be a tremendous improvement to the surrounding properties in this neighborhood. The Historic Commission has approved this project, as you've heard earlier, so this meets with their criteria. The surrounding commercial properties, the strip mall on Route 27 and the one across the street, will not be negative impacted, and I believe that there's going to be a positive impact, and that a sidewalk is going to be proposed along Route 27, and one is under discussion this evening for Clover Place. Landscaping is proposed that will buffer this project from surrounding properties, as well as appropriate screening of the trash enclosure and the property immediately to our side. So I don't see any negative impacts at all to surrounding properties or to the neighborhood. The bulk variances can be granted under a C1 argument in that the irregularly shaped lot creates a front yard and side yard setback variance because of that irregular shape, particularly along Clover. If this lot were a rectangle, we would not have those problems. I do believe that this is also meets the requirements of the C2, which is called a flexible C, and that the benefits outweigh the detriments. And I believe this application can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantial impairment to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance.
Do you have a conclusion as to whether there are any at all negative impacts as a result of this application?
Based upon the conversations here this evening instigated by some members of the board, I believe that improvements have been made to this site plan, and I can not identify any negative impacts.
Thank you. No further questions.
Are there any questions from board members?
Now, Ms. McIver, that concludes my witnesses.
Actually, you know what, yeah, before, so I looked at the ordinance, with regard to this sign, and I apologize if that conversation had been done, but, there is a section of the ordinance that does not allow signage on the roof. 111D. So I forget then what your answer to that was, whether you move it or ask for the variance or?
We are not going to ask for the variance at this time. First of all, there's a question as to whether that constitutes a roof or not, but that's for another discussion with you as the zoning officer. So my position tonight is we are not asking for an approval for any attached sign. We will sit down and work with you if we can come up with a determination that a sign is permitted either at that location or someplace else that's conforming. We will just apply for a sign permit. If you make a determination that to put it there we need a variance, we'll come back for a variance. So we are not seeking any approval. I don't want to clutter the application with that sign, so we're not seeking approval of that sign this evening.
Okay, and then with regard to historic, that design that the architect presented, is that exactly what was presented and was that in response to comments, and have you gone, or do you still have to go back to them?
No, we were at historic twice. We started with the original building. As you recall, the original building was a two-story building. They made us change it. What we showed them at historic, and I was there, was this building. Actually, it wasn't in color. The drawing that we had before historic was in black and white, but it was exactly what the board is seeing this evening. But we did bring the materials and the colors to them and showed them the materials and colors. So what they approved is what the board is looking at.
Okay, so as far as they're concerned,
Yeah.
are you expected back?
The only thing we were expected back was the question as to we may have to do a historic analysis on that site.
Okay, but not related to the architecture of the building?
Not related to the building.
Thank you.
Well, motion now, Bob.
I would move that the meeting be open to the public for a hearing on this ordinance.
I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone from the public wishing to come forward to speak or have questions about this application, now's the time to do it. Please come forward to the
Somebody put a mic back up.
microphone there. And give us your name and your address. Be sworn in, please.
Yes, my
Okay,
name is
if I could
Howard
swear you in
Rubenstein.
quickly? No, over here. There you go. If you could raise your right hand for me. Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
Howard L. Rubenstein, Rubenstein. My home address is 99 Hidden Lake Drive in North Brunswick, New Jersey, and I am the owner of Dabbs Plaza 3029, Route 27 in Franklin Park.
Yes.
I just have a question because I was a little confused. I took a look at the drawings. I think they're very nice. I think it's a good fit. I think it's going to be really good for the township and Route 27. Two concerns and questions that I have. I'm happy that the variance that was originally 4 feet from my property is now 6 feet. But my question is that the retaining wall or the physical building? I didn't get a chance to see that.
The building will be 6 feet from the property line.
The building will be 6 feet. The retaining wall will be a little before, but that's okay. I have no problem with it. And the other question I had was, I happen to sit on the North Brunswick Planning Board, but I don't know what the rules are. What are the rules for parking spaces for the proposed use?
It is
One for
one per three. So we propose 66 seats. We have 22 parking.
22, fine.
So we are in compliance.
Right. And that includes your employees.
The ordinance doesn't differentiate.
Yeah.
It's based on seats.
Seats, no problem. Thank you. I appreciate.
Is there anyone else?
Seeing,
Yes, please come
yes,
forward now.
If you could raise your right hand for me, over here. Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please.
Hamish Patel, 7 Clover Place, Franklin Park, New Jersey, 08823. Patel, P-A-T-E-L. Yes, guys, I was wondering for the walking place for Clover Place, will you guys do that, or you guys are just thinking about doing that? And how far will it be inside our property? Sidewalk, I mean, sorry.
Well, I'm not sure, I think the board was heading towards
Yes.
requiring it, but just to make it clear, the sidewalk, if there is a sidewalk along Clover, the board is only requiring it along their frontage. So it would not be along the entirety of Clover Place. It would stop at their property line. So if you're the next house up, it's not going to be in front of your house. This applicant would not be building it in front of your house.
Oh, okay. I didn't quite understand that. That's
Yeah, no, it's a good question. That's, I think the board understands that because it's the nature of
Yes.
these type applications.
Yes,
but
it's
it would-
only their own property.
No, no.
that-
Oh, okay,
They'll
I
be
understand.
building
Yeah, I
on.
see it across the street too on Ria Center, whatever it's called, Ria Plaza. Yeah, they also have a sidewalk too. I understand. All right, thank you.
If there's no one else,
seeing no one else coming forward, I would move that the public portion be closed.
I'll second the motion. All those in favor? Aye. Right. I'll entertain a motion. Someone like to make a motion?
Oh, I will try. I would move approval of the application with the following conditions, and if I forget any, someone I hope will remind me. But certainly the two that come most to mind are the extension of sidewalk along Route 27 and the creation of a sidewalk along Clover Place. And I would add that we would let, I don't know, Ted, how you feel about this, but they've asked for a variance for 3 street trees instead of 4, so I would agree with the 3 street trees. And if there are other things I forgot.
Yes, Peter,
Just
would
taking a
you
quick look.
help us?
No trash pickup prior to 8 a.m.
Modify all plans to make sure that the street trees that are added are going to be 2-inch minimum caliper. That's all I have in one of the signs.
Okay, I have a few more.
Okay, we
The
got-
6-foot solid fence along the adjacent commercial
Yep.
property, that the connection from the sidewalk to the internal sidewalk would be along Clover instead of Route 27. They'll work with staff to achieve a continuous landscape hedge along those 7 spaces. Parapet wall on the top of the roof. I think the engineer said they would actually try to explore the second tree on Route 27. So you may want to incorporate that. They mentioned that incorporating some changes to the design of the signage, including a masonry base, and that both signs would be consistent with the architecture of the building. And that's all I have.
And they would work with you for a sign for the front of the building.
I think both signs, they said.
Yeah, also we're reducing the size of the building by 2 feet to eliminate, or to reduce the setback, or to increase the setback to 6 feet.
Yes.
And did, you mentioned quite a list, I wasn't sure. The one other thing that occurred to me, you may have already mentioned, which is to work with the township about the lighting in the parking lot, to make sure that all spaces are safe.
Yes.
Motion has been made, I'll second it.
A second.
Okay.
Councilman Chase?
Yes.
Mahir Rafik? Cecile McIver?
Yes.
Robert Mettler?
Yes.
Mustafa Manzarek?
Yes.
Charles Brown?
I would like to say yes, but I would also like to add that it's a beautiful building and a great improvement to the site. Thanks for being open to, making the improvements necessary so that everyone in the area can enjoy it. Yes.
And Guy Namalola?
Yes, additionally, I want to add that a couple of people will be employed. You bring in a restaurant like this that will, just like you have in Woodbury to this area, will help to let a lot of people engage in terms of working for your organization. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have master plan.
Yes, then this is actually the public hearing on 3 elements of the master plan. If the board recalls, I presented all 3 of these in a work session in June. We had a pretty lengthy discussion on that. Because of the hour, and I think we don't have a single member of the public, so since the board has basically already heard it, I'm going to give a very abridged version of the presentation. For the record, the 3 elements that we're talking about are the Comprehensive Farmland Preservation Plan, the Environmental Resource Inventory, and the Historic Preservation Plan. All 3 of those are on the township website under both the planning board and the planning department. We have 2 different places where those 3 documents can be found, and they've been up there for the past 2 months. So as far as I'll give a brief discussion on the environmental resource inventory. The last one was done in 2008. I worked with the Township's Environmental Commission to prepare this document, and I'll also say that all 3 of them were prepared in close consultation in a series of meetings and series of drafts with the respective committees. So for example, the environmental resource inventory working closely with the Environmental Commission. The Farmland Preservation Plan was prepared in close conversation, several drafts over numerous years, frankly, with the Agricultural Advisory Committee. And then Historic Preservation Commission, I think, or plan, again, working with the Historic Advisory Preservation Commission. So the ERI, again, was prepared last in 2008. It is basically an inventory of all of the different environmental things you can think of, wetlands, forests, contaminated sites, etc. It is, I think, in total 150 pages or so in terms of maps and text explaining all of the various different maps. It's on the website. Again, you may want to peruse it, and we should, we can use that as a basis for different decisions, including land use decisions, and incorporating, using it as a resource for our larger master plan and land use plan decisions. And also it follows we wanted to follow the Sustainable Jersey guidelines. They had very specific guidelines of what environmental resource inventory has to have in order to qualify for a certain amount of points in the Sustainable Jersey program, so we did that. The Historic Preservation Plan was last done in 2006. The plan that is, the proposed plan that is before you follows both the requirements of the municipal land use law and, again, the Sustainable Jersey requirements. Some of the main things that it asks or requires us to do, first is an inventory. So there's very extensive inventory, not just of our historic areas, our historic districts. There's also an extremely comprehensive inventory of the 300 plus historic sites and buildings within the township. And again, that's all documented in the plan in terms of tables and a series of maps. Then it has it requires a threats and assets inventory, basically kind of what are the things that are helping with historic preservation, what are the things that are threatening the township's efforts to have historic preservation. There's a public policy evaluation where we're required to evaluate our other elements of the master plan as well as the elements of our land development regulations to see kind of what things, again, are supportive of historic preservation and what things may not be supportive. And then lastly, there's an action plan where, I think by the very name of that, you get the sense of what should we be doing. There's I think a total of 10 or 12 recommendations of specific actions that we should be doing to further our efforts for historic preservation. And then lastly, the Farmland Preservation Plan. As I said before, this was working over a series of years with a series of drafts sent to the state. We think we're now in very good shape. We've had received comments back from them, and we think we're finally kind of addressing the last few things. This is very important to get this plan approved. We need this plan to be adopted following their guidelines in order to receive funds from the State Agricultural Development Committee. A lot of times when there's either the township and the county, or sometimes we partner with the county, sometimes we partner with the state to preserve farms, and we have to follow their requirements. So this goes towards that. Similar to the other plans, there's lots of inventories involved, a series of maps, series of tables. Just some quick, interesting points, I think, as I raised last time, but it's worth mentioning. Roughly 30% of the town's land area is dedicated to farming in some way, whether it's preserve farms, farms that are farm assessed, township, county, or state lands that are leased to farmers. So I think that was a figure that stood out to me, because it does tell you, even though we've had a lot of development, still 30% of the township's land area is devoted to farming in some way. And that 93% of the town has farmland capable soils. So I thought that those were two interesting things. Land use planning context, it's similar to the historic preservation plan. basically were required to evaluate ourselves, evaluate your zoning, your land development regulations, see things that are supportive of farmland preservation, things that aren't. So things like cluster zoning, the extensive area of the town that is rural density zoning, our A's agricultural zone, our RR5, which is 5-acre zoning, RR3, canal preservation, which is 6-acre zoning. All of those things are supportive of preservation, as well as, again, things like cluster subdivisions. And then lastly, there's, again, just like the historic preservation plan, there's an action plan. What are we going to do? And the main thing is two things. One is identifying the targeted farms. So again, the Agricultural Commission has identified a couple dozen properties in the township that, for various reasons, due to their size, the nature of their soils, et cetera, their location in the township, these are properties that the township would like to target for farmland preservation, and those are mapped, identified, and then there's also a spending plan, a rough estimate of what this might cost and how it relates to the funds, both existing and future, in our open space funds. So those are the three plans. Again, we went over it in good detail 2 months ago for the purpose of the hearing. I wanted to give a brief, I think that was a very brief summary,
Yes,
giving a big picture view of what these three different plans are. So if the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I've been reviewing the Sustainable Jersey comments on our submission. I haven't gotten to the ERI yet, but the farmland preservation, they said, just send us the new URL. And the historic preservation, I feel the comment is completely unreasonable. It wants a survey of the architectural history of the township, and then there's a lot more, which I suspect is already there. I haven't made the comparison yet. I almost think that the guy just has a set of comments that he puts in without reading the plan. It sort of says, in effect, get a grant from SHPO with a certified local government grant to write it, hire a consultant, and then I'll consider it. But
I read, I think, the comment you made at first, which was, I read the comment, and then I read the section, and my response was kind of, it's all that. Not quite sure what the comment was about. The plan has all of the elements that are required by both the municipal land use law and the Sustainable Jersey comments, and I think it is just as detailed as any other historic preservation plan that has their certification. So what I would suggest, I guess I have a question to you, is I know there is all three of these elements have more than enough information, there's more than robust enough for your approval, in my opinion. My question then is, I know part of this is, part of the goal is to get these adopted so that they satisfy Sustainable Jersey requirements. So my question to you is, would you rather board wait and adopt it after we've had a chance to kind of digest Sustainable Jersey's comments, or would you want to just move forward?
I think we should just move forward now and argue with them about the historic preservation. It's possible that Andrew Burien can supply something that meets the request for a survey of the architectural history. I forget the exact wording he had, but which we could essentially put in as a separate document, I think.
No, we have surveys of a number of the historic properties that were were done.
Oh, yeah, we have all sorts of things there.
There, yeah, and so it seems a strange comment. I would agree with you because we have a lot of our architectural history is on record one way or another. Maybe not.
I think, just thinking back, he seems to want a sort of a survey. Well, in the 18th century, they were building this sort of house. In the 19th century, they were building this sort of building. In the 20th century, you get everything.
Ed, perhaps maybe just a quick conversation with the gentleman might clear things up. We could say.
Yeah, I intend to.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, and Andrew might be able to put something together fairly easily.
Yeah.
So any questions, comments? Yeah, so this is a hearing. There is nobody sitting here, so I don't know if we can just reflect that on the record.
I think you just did.
Yes, okay, so, and then, again, this is.
Do we need to open it to the public and then close it to
No, that's, I think
satisfy?
you're just advised that.
I think to the extent that there's no one here, it would be futile.
Okay.
Yes. So again, this is for you for a vote. So if somebody is, wants to make a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion that
I'll
we
second it.
And it would be to adopt all three elements that have been
adopt
presented to you.
all three.
I second it.
Councilman Chase?
Yes.
Mahir Rafik?
Yes.
Cecile McIver?
Yes.
Robert Mettler?
Yes.
Mustafa Manzari?
Yes.
Charles Brown?
Yes.
And Godwin Amalola?
Yes.
A motion to adjourn?
No,
Oh, wait,
just
that's right,
before
Ted has
everybody
something.
leaves, I would like to essentially suggest an addition to, probably be in the zoning ordinance somewhere, to the effect that for any new multifamily housing, apartment type things, of, say, 10 or more units, the exact number is not anything I'm fixed on, we require a charging station for electric vehicles in the parking area. And the space for charging would count as a parking space. But I thought probably the best thing was to bring that suggestion to the planning board first.
Yeah, that's reasonable enough. Because that is the way forward, and that's the technology most people are buying now. Electric car, because it
Yes.
helps in energy conservation. It helps the prevention of pollution in the environment. So I would support that.
Yeah, that's the.
Yes, it
exact
provides for the
point.
future.
Yeah, will encourage people, because as it is now, anybody living in such a structure probably would not be able to get any charging at their residence, whereas if you have a single-family residence, you
do that, right?
You can do it. And given that we need to move toward electric cars as fast as possible, I'd like to have something. We might think further about requiring it in office buildings. Well, probably not going to have any more office buildings built, but think about it for larger commercial facilities, that places with a number of employees where then people could charge them during the day. But for now, I was suggesting it for apartment buildings.
Ed, perhaps we could ask our planner to come up with some suggestions, and
That is indeed the next step.
yeah, and there may be a way to include commercial that it doesn't come to my mind right away, but with some thought and looking at it again, we may be able to improve on it. But I think it's a good idea. I think it's something actually that might move Franklin, oddly enough, ahead of a number of other towns. Although we have been ahead in a number of things over the
Well,
years.
I think we definitely are. In fact, Sustainable Jersey is asking me to sit on a panel at the NJIC Environmental Congress in the fall to talk about what we've done with electric vehicles and charging stations.
Okay.
All right, so I'm seeing a bunch of positive head nods, which I'll take as I will put something together, both in
Yes.
terms of multifamily. I'll see if there's some examples of shopping centers, for example, commercial uses. I come back and we can put it in a work session at the end of the meeting.
No. Oh, and hotels. But we've got so many already. Part of the point being is it's a lot cheaper to install it when you're building than to retrofit. And when the application went to the Board of Adjustment, but when the proposal for a quick check where the quality in used to be right off 287, they were before the Historic Commission, and I suggested that there they should have a level 3 charging station, which is the really fast, really high voltage type. This would be a level 2 charging station which is the 220 volt type. But right off 27 is the best place in the township for the really high, a level 3 charging station that would allow people to get a substantial charge while they were in quick check for 20 minutes. And they said they'd consider it. I don't know whether they did, but.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second the motion.
Okay, I should have
those in
said so
favor?
moved with that.
Aye.